Welcome back to the Naughty Corner. This episode sits somewhere between a one-off coverage of current events and part of a series, because we're going to look at part of a very large ongoing picture, but with a focus on some more recent revelations. I'm talking about the very polarising COVID-19 vaccine and some of the findings that have come out lately that not made the news here in New Zealand for some reason. Before you say it, no, I'm not against all vaccines, and yes, I know COVID has had a negative health impact on people, but so has the flu. It's killed a bunch of people. Diseases being detrimental to human health isn't news, but a vaccine, especially an enforced one, doing the same thing is. So why has the former been all over the media, but the latter hasn't? One interesting bit of information that came out just a couple of months ago was a report published by the International Journal of Vaccine Theory, Practice and Research. The paper is titled Forensic Analysis of the 38 Subject Deaths in the 6-Month Interim Report of the Pfizer-BioNTech BNT162b2 mRNA Vaccine Clinical Trial. So, this was an analysis of Pfizer's own clinical trial results of the vaccine they distributed around the world, results that were available way back when they were seeking approval with various countries. Some of the most alarming information to come out of this assessment was that Pfizer hid almost 80% of the deaths from its vaccine trials. At the bottom of page 975, the report states for itself, "Most alarming, we found evidence of an over 3.7-fold increase in the number of deaths due to cardiac events in BNT162b2 vaccinated subjects that Pfizer-BioNTech did not report." What's more, the same paper reveals Pfizer reported results differently between vaccinated and placebo patients. The delay in reporting vaccinated deaths was a median of 18 days, whereas the median reporting delay for unvaccinated was just 5 days. This allowed them to report most of the deaths after emergency authorization had already been granted. As the paper itself states, delayed reporting of the subject deaths into the case report form obscured the cardiac adverse events signal and allowed the Pfizer-BioNTech emergency use authorization to proceed unchallenged. Now, knowing Pfizer had been hiding and manipulating data all along, something many had suspected from the start due to the pharmacy giant's atrocious history, many of the other surprising research findings that have been emerging over the last year come into a more believable and concerning light. A recent study conducted in Switzerland and published in the Journal of Heart Failure Association of the European Society of Cardiology revealed some shocking findings earlier this year. It has shown that 1 in 35, 2.8% of those who received a COVID vaccination booster suffered a myocardial injury. Also, because during the test the subjects were informed about the risk of such injuries, they took care not to overexert themselves. So in the wild, so to speak, the risk of these injuries could be even higher. Similar figures can be found from elsewhere around the world. For instance, closer to home and a little earlier in the year in July, the Western Australia Vaccine Surveillance Annual Report for 2021 was published. It found that the rate of adverse effects from the COVID vaccine was about 24 times higher than the average of all other vaccines per dose given. Keep in mind you were required to take multiple doses, so the increased likelihood of adverse effects expected from fully vaccinating against COVID compared to other similar treatments is staggering. Just last month, the life insurance firms in the US published a report detailing the following. Deaths in young adults in 2023 so far are actually over 20% above what we would expect, up 24% for 15 to 19-year-olds, and 40 to 44-year-olds are even worse at 25%. This steep increase in unexpected deaths has been abnormally high since year 2020. The phenomenon has been seen across the world, with similar articles being published for the UK, Canada, Australasia, etc. The article explained there has been an increase in cardiac mortality across all ages, and tragically I do mean all ages. Another separate and federally funded study from America's FDA came out around the same time and was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It found that in a study of more than 3 million children aged between 12 to 17 that those who received the Pfizer vaccination faced an elevated risk of heart inflammation. According to the study, the number of instances of myocarditis and pericarditis that were found in this age group met the threshold for something known as the safety signal as defined by the CDC, meaning unusual or unexpected patterns of adverse effects following vaccination. Shockingly, myocarditis was found to be 3 to 30 times more prevalent than the historical average in children that had received the vaccine. That brings me to the point of this episode. With all this information, why is the vaccine still being administered here in New Zealand? More than just being administered, it's being advertised and pushed, especially to young people. As you can see on screen at the moment, here is a Marvel Avengers themed ad from our little country aimed squarely at the younger members of our society. Who's paying for this? Ultimately, we the taxpayer, but who's continuing to greenlight it when we have much more information now regarding the vaccine's efficacy than when COVID first fell upon us, and it doesn't look good. Recently, a whistleblower concerning the vaccine came forth here in New Zealand, and the media fell upon him like the pack of establishment attack dogs they are. In case you're not up with the story, a Ministry of Health database administrator came forth at the start of this month as a whistleblower. He claimed that as the designer and sole operator of the Ministry of Health vaccine payment system, he was in a position where he was privy to see a very alarming mortality rate linked to the vaccine. The claims made by this whistleblower are that as many as 1 in 4 recipients of the vaccine died after their injection. This is interesting to be sure, and his figure of 1 in 4 seems to line up perfectly with the data published by the US insurance firms and publications on excess deaths by various health boards around the world I mentioned earlier. The whistleblower's offering is not an official report, however. It's an information leak, so I won't try to make much of a case from it. Don't get me wrong, the guy seems smart. He's got a master's in science, and when you listen to him speak, he's obviously a details guy who's done his research. What I find more interesting, however, is how this man has been treated. There was a time when being a whistleblower was considered something praiseworthy, a move that would cost you personally, but was for the betterment of society as a whole. By contrast, this guy, who used the pseudonym Winston Smith, was immediately arrested, and others associated with him also taken in by police. While mainstream media sites decried his crimes of revealing people's personal details, they themselves went ahead and published his personal information in the form of his real name, which I won't share because I have a soul. In one article covering the matter, they invoked the opinions of a woman who was furious her parents' information had been leaked, as they both died shortly after taking the vaccine. Except no one knew this from the whistleblower's interview, as he didn't mention any personal details, just sums and percentages. The details of what happened to this woman's parents weren't revealed until she put it out there herself and then blamed the whistleblower for it. In one breath, she said he wasn't a medical practitioner, so couldn't possibly know the vaccine killed people, and in the next, she herself said that her parents definitely did not die from the vaccine, as if she knew. This is what passes for journalistic investigation these days. What a joke. I'll admit, it's a little entertaining seeing them kick up such an outrage about personal details being leaked, not only because they then turn around and do it themselves, but because of what they championed not long ago. You'll recall they were all 4 people being forced to reveal their personal medical details in the form of their vaccine status, not just to their employer but also to access vendors and services via a phone app. Prior to COVID, our right to privacy regarding such information was something protected under the Bill of Rights. If they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all, but the simple truth is that information regarding the vaccine and the statistics associated with it should be something that's available to the New Zealand public. Why are they guarding this information so closely? The whistleblower had a lot to lose by coming forth, but little if anything to gain. By contrast, Pfizer made a killing, pun not intended, by selling their vaccine to various governments around the world. Part of the whistleblower's interview talked about how the supplier was being paid per dose administered, so they had a vested interest in getting as many needles and arms as possible. None of us are stupid enough not to recognise people who assisted in this goal would likely have had their pockets lined for doing so. That's how business works. The media pundits, the heads of various ministries, the politicians, the experts that were endlessly quoted, all need to be investigated, and they know it. So right now there's a lot of squawking regarding the whistleblower, and as it was beautifully articulated in Hamlet, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. For those of you siding with the media's take on the issue, let's have a quick look back at some of the things they told us regarding the COVID vaccination. Remember their mantra about it being safe and effective?
Vaccinations are our armour. They help keep us safe.
Well, we've already seen from the studies mentioned earlier in this episode it wasn't safe. But what about effective? Unless you've sipped very deeply from the Kool-Aid, you probably already know the answer to that. Recall how they told us the vaccine was far superior to natural immunity. Well, a study published out of Israel earlier this year showed that the reverse was true and to a massive degree. They had 2 groups, one that had received the infection but not been vaccinated, and another which was its antipode. The findings were that those with natural immunity were 13 times less likely to be infected.
So your antibodies are probably better at that point than the vaccination.
What about the claim that vaccinations stop the spread? A paper from Northwestern University's medical school in Chicago found that during the most infectious period, the first 8 days after receiving the virus, there is no significant difference in infectiousness of those that were vaccinated and those that were not. While the study only came out recently, this information was apparent to those who were paying attention long ago. I thought 2 years back there was a fairly amusing story making the headlines about a COVID outbreak on a fully vaccinated cruise ship. I could go on with examples of where the media and experts got it wrong, but again my point is simple. They weren't right about the vaccine being safe, they were off about the vaccine's efficacy, and now they want you to trust them as they try to demonise a whistleblower. If you haven't already, perhaps it's time you stop listening to the mainstream media. Their track record isn't looking very good. One of the tactics they've used to try and poison the well and slander the whistleblower is by calling him and anyone associated with him a conspiracy theorist. The problem with that is it's lost its edge recently since, with regards to COVID and the vaccine, conspiracy theorists have a much better score than the legacy media does. So if you identify as a conspiracy theorist, good job. If you don't, perhaps you should go find one and thank them for keeping an eye out, or who knows what kind of grifts you might end up as the victim of. More importantly than that, however, is the fact we're still pushing an expensive, ineffective and potentially dangerous vaccine in our country. Even worse, it's being targeted at our younger generations, a group virtually immune to the very disease they're being vaccinated against. There needs to be an investigation into our COVID response. The whistleblower should be protected as someone innocent until proven guilty, and our new government needs to put on its big boy pants and step up to the plate, because this is not a small matter you can just hand wave away. Anyway, that's all for now, so until next time, have a good one.